So in today's video, we'll be discussing how a Code Veronica remake could fix a specific plot hole, and we'll also discuss which Resident Evil remake should happen first. Anyways, let's get started. Joda says, it's kind of ironic that Wesker hates Chris so much, given that he's the reason why Chris is alive when you think about Ori remake. He did save him from those dogs. Yeah, that's a good plot hole to point out, Joda. I'm not gonna lie. That's something that I've always found to be kind of weird. Was the fact that, why is Wesker not, like, why does he hate him so much? Like, we know from Resident Evil 1 remake at the end, Wesker's like literally just talking to Chris, and Chris is like, okay, like, and and then he gets stabbed by the tyrant and he leaves. But we don't really see a hatred for Chris until we get to CV. And obviously CV came out before the remake, and we didn't really see anything. So that was weird. That was really strange. I was actually just having a conversation about that before, talking about if they remake Resident Evil 1 remake. Oh, Virus is back. Yeah. If they remake Resident Evil 1 remake, they need to fix the huge plot hole of Wesker hating Chris, because it doesn't make any sense. It's a huge plot hole in the story. Because if you play CV, that's when Wesker's like, I despise Chris.
My brother is not the kind of person you think he is.
I despise Chris.
What are you gonna do to him?
And that's when he starts choking his sister and just freaking chucks her, like, like it's super weird. Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's super weird, but yeah, like that's something that needs to be addressed. Of why Chris, like, it would be interesting if in a Resident Evil 1 remake, sorry, I got some stuff on my face. If Resident Evil 1 remake, at the end, if Chris kind of ruins Wesker's plans, and or they explain why he hates him. You know what I mean? Like, what if Chris is the one that kills Wesker, and then he gets impaled by the tyrant after? Then it would give some reason as to why Wesker hates him, because it doesn't make sense. As the remake and the OG Resident Evil 1 stand, there's no reason for Wesker to hate Chris as much as he does in CV and RE5 remake.
Can I give my take on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's just the delusion, again, because that's always kind of been what Wesker is. I think because his whole plan was to annihilate the STARS members in the mansion, and Chris was the one that ended up escaping.
Yeah.
I think that definitely leads into some of that. Is just his thought process. Again, not every villain is justified unless it's within his own reasoning. And for me, that's what I think leads him to hate Chris so much. And then again, leading into Code Veronica, where he elaborates on it a little bit more, than having to rebuild himself with the virus and everything. I think it's just, again, like I said, just a delusion.
Well, was it elaborated in Code Veronica? Like, where? Because I'm actually curious. Like, you
just
said it...
like briefly, from what I remember, it was mostly just due to the fact that he ended up, I think, living over him and having to turn himself into, I guess, the monster that he is. It's like, it's very loose in how it's justified. Yeah. But I'm just giving extra context to what I think would make sense.
But yeah, that's my point as well, is that CV did not explain where his hatred came from. And I would also counter argue that point where you said that, well, Chris kind of ruined his plans, but it wasn't just Chris. It was also technically, Rebecca was also there, Barry was also there.
Yeah.
Jill was also a huge component of RE1, but he doesn't really have the same hatred that he has for Chris as he has for Jill.
Right.
Like, that's never been the case. Like, and I'm just thinking, obviously one could argue that, RE5, Jill is like mind controlled, so Wesker doesn't really care about Jill because, he already has her, like, he's already controlling her. But if you go back to Lost in Nightmares, which takes place a year after Revelations in 2006, that game, you see an interaction with Chris, Jill, and Wesker. Mm-hmm. And Wesker still hates Chris at that point. But you don't really see that anger go towards Jill. Like, Jill's just there fighting Wesker. Sorry, but you don't really see that anger is what I'm getting at. You know what I mean? Like, it's weird. It's weird.
Yeah,
it's weird why Wesker hates Chris so much. And so my point is that if they are going to be making a new remake of 1, they definitely need to expand that. Or if they remake Code Veronica first, I would love kind of like a flashback of talking about why Wesker hated that. And then obviously if they make a remake of 1, they could go back and kind of just give us more exposition as to why that's the case.
I agree.
But as it stands, there's not enough information for us to know why Wesker hates Chris. Let's read some chats about that as well. I hate how they cut a lot of things in RE7 and 8. Just give them some time if they're not done yet. Yeah, Wesker said that Chris always ruins his plans and that's why he hates Chris. But as mentioned, that's not enough of a point to suggest that he hates Chris only, because Jill was also there. Jill's also helping Chris, and how come he doesn't hate Jill that much? You know what I mean? Wesker should hate Barry the most. He was the one that actually got a shot off him. LOL. Yeah, it's weird that Barry also, and also the other thing that I've also stated a lot is that if they were to remake RE1, they need to fix the kind of plot holes of, if you play as Chris, you save Jill and Rebecca, but you don't save Barry, and if you play as Jill, you save Barry and Chris, but nobody knows about Rebecca. You know what I mean? Like, that's a huge plot hole. I liked what Umbrella Conspiracy did, the S.D. Perry novel, where they actually made the characters go through the whole mansion together. So Chris, Rebecca were going in one location of the mansion while Jill and Barry were going to the other, and then they all kind of wrapped and ended the game together. You know, they all left in the helicopter, which makes the most sense. By the way, guys, if you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like, since it actually helps out the video a ton. And we're also on the grind to 10K subscribers. So if you haven't already, consider subscribing. But anyways, let's get back to the video. Lady Huget says, yeah, that's exactly what I want for a remake for RE1, to be honest. I feel like the story can be fleshed out a lot. I also hope they make 2 different scenarios for both Chris and Jill, so they both feel the trauma. Yeah. It could be that he hated Chris because he thought Chris was inferior to him, but still managed the upper hand over Wesker despite being weaker. Yeah, but I don't know. Like as mentioned, CV, he really hated Chris. Like he even says, I despise Chris. Like, that's where his hatred starts. And at the end of RE1, Wesker wasn't talking, like, whether it's the remake or the OG, Wesker wasn't talking like that to Chris. He wasn't being like, I've always hated you, Chris. You know, you're always ruining my plans and stars, and now you're here, and now I'm going to kill you. Like, it wasn't that kind of a thing. It was more like, you're an idiot, you know, Chris. Chris, no, I'm the smartest guy here. You guys all suck. And then he just gets impaled, you know? So, yeah. It's weird. I think this hatred began because Chris destroyed the mansion Tyrant, aka his golden meal ticket, into the organization back in '98. For a narcissist like Wesker, that cuts deep. But again, like, you could also argue that Jill was also there. You know what I mean? Like, especially with the remake. I don't know. I don't think it's enough. Raiden says you're correct. Wesker's hatred for Chris needs to be fixed in RE. Yeah, definitely. Or just give us more context.
Yeah. I think they just left it up to our imagination to kind of piece the things together, which again is fine, but then it leaves a lot up for speculation, right? As everyone in chat has something slightly different on the take, right?
Yeah. But it seems we are consistently, like, we're all, you know, agreeing that they definitely need to expand.
We need more
on that.
of it.
Yeah, we need more.
100%.
Now, the reason I think Code Veronica Remake should happen first is, as I stated in my previous videos, Code Veronica, a lot of newer fans to the series, or even casual fans, don't play it. Like, they literally don't play Resident Evil Code Veronica. I've had so many people comment on my videos saying that they've never experienced Resident Evil Code Veronica because, for starters, the game doesn't look great. It definitely needs a new remake. Resident Evil 5 Remake is definitely still playable, as well as RE1 Remake. Obviously, RE1 Remake has other issues with it, especially for newcomers, because it's all tank controls, and not everybody is a fan of those outdated retro controls. But as I've stated several times on the channel, I've actually grown up with tank controls, so that's not an issue for me, but I'm not a newcomer to the series. Now, another reason that it's kind of hard for them to get into the game is especially since it's not available on Steam. Another reason I think Code Veronica should be first here is because it's the first game where we have Wesker be a villain, a true villain, from the beginning all the way to the end. Now, for those of you that might be confused as to what I'm saying here, what I'm really saying is that if we go back to Resident Evil 1 or Resident Evil 1 Remake, whichever you pick, Wesker isn't really an open kind of villain. He's very, I guess, closeted. You know, you don't really see Wesker, you know, being evil until the finale of Resident Evil 1 Remake. And even in Resident Evil 1 Remake, or even in Resident Evil 1, the issue here is that Wesker from Resident Evil 1 or Resident Evil Remake doesn't act the same as the Wesker that we see in Code Veronica, Resident Evil 5, and Resident Evil 4 Remake. That's a much angrier Wesker. Now, as I proposed earlier on in the video, I definitely think that Code Veronica Remake, if it were to happen first, they could just fix this plot hole by giving showing us a flashback to showcase how and why Wesker is so angry at Chris in Code Veronica in the later games, right? After Code Veronica. And then after Code Veronica releases and we get Resident Evil 5 Remake, whatever, then I think we should go back to Resident Evil 1 remake, and that's when they can actually fully showcase, you know, more in detail as to why Chris hates Wesker. And the last reason I think Resident Evil Code Veronica remake should happen first is because if we get a remake of Resident Evil 5 before a Code Veronica remake, and if that Resident Evil 5 remake was exactly like the OG, it wouldn't be beneficial in highlighting one of the best villains in the series to newcomers. The only way a Resident Evil 5 remake would work for this specific case in highlighting Wesker would be if Resident Evil 5 remake makes it truly obvious that Wesker is alive in the finale of Resident Evil 5 remake. And that could actually lead us to Resident Evil 9. Click this video if you guys want to see my full theory on Wesker returning in Resident Evil 9. But anyways, thank you so much for watching.